Hi everyone, my name is Tori, this is Novel Life, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a really fun video where I'm going to be reacting to your favorite books of 2023. I will say that I previously did this video, I think back in November, December, and while that was really fun, I really like to see what books made your top books of 2023 because I already posted mine. You guys know that I've been raving about those books for a while, but you never know, at the end of the year, some books can like sneak up and become some of your favorites. But before we dive into your favorite books of 2023, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, and that is Max Monrroe. Max Monrroe has a brand new book out called Cluelessly Yours. It is a very wild ride. It is a friends to lovers kind of love triangle romance. Basically, our female character wakes up from being hit by a car, and she is kind of stuck between two men, one who is a medical doctor and one who is a businessman that has no problem telling her that he's extremely interested in her. This is also a single mom romance where a female character is actually like in her 40s, which we usually don't see those type of romances. So love that that is included in this book. If you don't know who Max Monrroe is, they are an author duo. They write rom-com-y romances, and while this is a third book in a series, you can read it completely as a standalone. You won't miss anything. I will say that this has a bunch of side characters, and I think Max Monrroe does side characters really well because you also become attached to them as well as the main characters. Now, I'm obviously not going to tell you who she ends up with because she's torn between these two people, but if you want to check out Cluelessly Yours by Max Monrroe, I'll have the link in the description box below for you to pick up your copy. It is out now in Kindle Unlimited. You can buy the paperback, you can buy the audiobook. However you read, it's available to you. So make sure you go check out Cluelessly Yours. I'll link it in the description box below. Now, with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into your favorite books of 2023. I'm extremely excited to kind of really dive into them because while they were being submitted on my Instagram, if you don't know, I do a lot of the reacting videos. I put a little question box on my Instagram stories and I'll let you drop kind of like if I'm looking for recs, if I'm doing a video like reacting to your favorite books, I want you to put your favorite books in there. So it's just easier to do it on Instagram. So make sure you follow me over there if you don't already. I do post a lot of fun stuff over there. It's more like up-to-date life stuff too. So definitely go follow me over there. Anyway, enough about me chatting. Let's go ahead and dive into your favorite books. Now, I'm starting from the very top because I had a lot. Sometimes I get overwhelmed by how many responses you guys let me know. Like, honestly, the amount of people who drop their favorite books, I'm like, I never expect like 20 people and I have like 50 to go through. Some of these books are crossovers with some of my favorite books of the year, or multiple people have said the same book. So I barely glanced at these. Let's go ahead and jump in. Someone said The Right Move by Liz Tomforde. Between The Right Move and Caught Up by Liz Tomforde, I feel like there are a ton of people that have a Liz Tomforde book on their favorite books of the year. Mine was Caught Up because I personally loved Caught Up more than I loved The Right Move. I mean, like, The Right Move was a 5-star read, but then I read Caught Up and I was like, oh, this is like 10 times better in my opinion. So just the different types of tropes that are in there. And then someone also said right behind that, Right Moves. Yeah, there's quite a bit of Liz Tomforde on the top books of the year. Someone said The Nightingale, I'm assuming by Kristen Hanna. That is a very emotional historical fiction book. I am not surprised to see that. I mean, it's quite an older book. I think it came out like years ago, but I know when people do pick it up and do read it, they absolutely love it. So I'm not surprised that people love that. Someone said A Court of Silver Flames. Listen, Nesta and Cassian are like different from Feyre and Rhys. Like their love story is completely different, and let me tell you, it is so good. I want to reread ACOTAR, but with House of Flame and Shadow coming out, my priority has been to reread House of Earth and Blood and House of Sky and Breath. So will I do an ACOTAR reread this year? I want to, but I haven't reread A Court of Silver Flames since it came out. So someone said Beg for It, then D. Berties. I've never heard of this book before, but someone also put Losers by Harley LaRue. I know a lot of people like this series, Losers Part 1, Losers Part 2, and I've heard you have to read the Dare before you read those. But I've heard that when people read this, they really love it. Now, you have to tell me, do I have to read the Dare first, or can I just jump into Losers Part 1? And is it Why Choose? I don't know if it's Why Choose or it's just polyamorous, like with 2 or 3 people. I don't know. I can't remember. But someone said Tangled Lies by Pam Godwin, which I'm a huge Pam Godwin fan, but I realized that when she posted her like 2023 Wrapped thing, she wrote a lot last year, but she did not have a book come out, which means, are we going to get like 2 books from Pam Godwin this year? I don't know. I've also never read her oh, what is this series called? It's her like Knotted series. I haven't read that, but I'm glad to see a Pam Godwin. So someone put Project Hail Mary, and I think this is by Andy Weiner? Andy something. My brother, who is 17, actually bought this book at Barnes & Noble along with Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Did he buy The Martian or did he buy Project Hail Mary? He bought one of those books. And I'm actually really intrigued because I don't particularly like sci-fi. I prefer fantasy over sci-fi. So I'm like, do I pick up this book? Do I try it? Who knows? Who knows? Maybe I'll like it. Maybe me and Brandon will read it together. But I do know that a lot of people love this author's writing. So someone said An Optimist's Guide to Heartbreak, which this is one of the duets by Jennifer Hartman I have not read. So I'm 3 books behind. I have the duet, which is The Optimist's Guide to Heartbreak, and The Optimist's Guide to, it's a duet. There's 2 books. And then she had a new book come out that I have not read that came out at the end of 2023. So I'm a little bit far behind, but I know a lot of people love this book. So maybe I'll do a reading vlog, reading some favorites. Now, this one, I had like 5 or 6 people submit this book. I had 5 people submit Manacled. And that was one of my top books of the year. Hands down, it is an amazing fanfic. And I want to read more, but all the other fanfics are just that long. And that book consumed my life for like a whole week. Like literally a whole week, 5 days it took me to read that book. And I'm like, I could read like 4 other books in that time. So I'm like, when can I just take a weekend, not film, not work, not do anything, sit down and read another fanfic? Because there's another one on here that I'm very excited for. Someone said Strictly Pleasure by Carrie Elks. I've not heard of this book, but I'm going to look up some of these books because they sound good. The Brazen One by Daisy Jane. This is actually interesting. I'm very interested to see if I would like this book. Someone said A Fragile Enchantment by Allison Saft. Now, this book is actually one I have on hold at my library. So I heard that this book is more of like a historical fantasy, which is something I did not know I loved until I read Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. And then I was like, all right, this is my shit. I love historical fiction, and I love fantasy. So blending those 2 together in like this like very balanced way is my thing. So I think this A Fragile Enchantment typically leans a little bit more towards YA, but I'm willing to give it a try. I think it has some type of chronic illness rep in it, which is why it's been on my radar. But as soon as my hold comes in, I have the audiobook on hold. I do want to read it because I'm extremely excited about that one. Someone said Blood Mercy, and I think this is by Vela Roth. So I think I read this book back in, was it 2022? I went on like a huge KU fantasy binge and I found this book. I love the covers, but they are really long books. And I remember liking this first book. It was like an easy introduction to the fantasy world. And while most KU fantasy books are enemies to lovers, this one was a friends to lovers, which is something I really love. Like, it's friends to lovers, but they're actually from rival families, which I found really interesting. So I haven't continued on with the series, but I'm so glad you like this book. Someone said A Strange Love by Anne Aguirre? Horrible at pronouncing stuff. I have not heard of that one, but I definitely want to look it up. The Tragedy of Felix and Jake by J. Daniels. So I have only read Sweet Addiction by J. Daniels, and I do have this book on my shelf, but I have not read it. But everyone that I've heard read it said they cried. And I'm like, am I ready to cry? I don't know if I'm ready to cry. You know what I mean? So I have it on my shelves. I've been working on reading the books actually on my shelves. So it's something I want to do in 2024 is like read down a lot of my physical TBR. So will I get to it this year? We'll see. But it's one that I definitely want to read. Someone said Animal by Lisa Taddeo. Never heard of that book. I don't even know if that's a romance. Someone said Reckless by Elsie Silver. Loved Reckless. That was also on my top books of the year. And someone said Unsteady by Peyton Corinne. I loved Unsteady. Oh my God, that was also on my top books of the year. Sometimes it's interesting that when I read books, you guys have already read them and you're like, oh my God, yes, I'm so glad you loved it. It's one of my favorite books as well. But sometimes I read the book and then you guys read it. Now, this person submitted it. It's Melissa from Book Bar, which I love Melissa. She read it. And I remember like having it downloaded. And when I realized she gave it 5 stars, I was like, okay, let's move it up. And that's when I read it. And I was like, girl, this was amazing. I loved it. Now, this one is interesting to me. Someone said The Monster Trilogy by Rena Kent. Me and Rena Kent do not get along. We just do not get along. I don't know what it is. I don't particularly like her heroes. I don't particularly like her writing. But I do know that there are particular readers, specifically dark romance readers, who love her type of writing. So while she's not for me, I'm very glad you loved it and had a great time. I am going to try God of Fury by Rena Kent. It's an MM romance, and I've heard people say that if you don't like Rena Kent's writing, you're going to like this one. So that is literally my last chance to try her. It'll be my third chance reading her books. So it's going to be my last chance. And if I like it, then I might pick up more of her newer stuff as she releases it, but we'll see. Someone said Redeeming 6 by Chloe Walsh. I do have a Binding 13 here. Someone said Binding 13. Someone said Binding 13 as well. And you guys know the whole Boys of Tommen series was on my top books of the year because I absolutely fell in love with Chloe Walsh's writing. Those books are top tier to me. Like Taming 7 is coming out in April, and I am like counting down the days because I love that series so much. So I'm so happy that you guys love the Boys of Tommen series because it's literally some of my favorites. Someone said Iced Out by C.E. Ricky. I did read Iced Out, I think back in 2022, and I loved it. It was a very, very good time. It's an enemies to lovers MM romance where they're rivals, but they play on the same college team now. Like they've been rivals growing up, and then they have like this one night stand type thing, and they're like, oh my God, we won our game. We have to keep this going because they're superstitious. So love that. Someone said Behind the Net by Stephanie Archer. I have read Behind the Net and I gave it 4 stars. I like her writing. I did receive The Fake Out by Stephanie Archer from a friend because I like her covers, but I also wanted to read that book, and people have been rating it highly as well. Like it's like bingeable, like you can't put it down. So I'm very interested in Stephanie Archer's writing. So I'm really glad that was the top book of the year for you. Someone said How the Heart Breaks by Stacey Marie Brown. I have only read Stacey Marie Brown's her fantasy. I read 3 of her books and I was like, where's this romance? How is this a fantasy romance? They're not even together. So I don't know if it's just her fantasy stuff that's for me, or if I should try her contemporary stuff, because I do know she has some contemporary stuff, but I'm glad you like this one. Someone said June 1st by Jennifer Hartman. Now, June 1st by Jennifer Hartman is one of those books you either love it or you hate it. There's really not many people who are in between. And I do understand why people are in between, because it starts off when she's born, and our main male character is like 6 at the time. It's his best friend's little sister that he has a romance with. So you see them grow up, and it is a very emotional journey with these characters. It's more of like a romance that happens towards the end of the book, and you see how they kind of like are older and how they work out their romance and stuff. But it's also very tragic and heartbreaking and very emotional. So I don't know. I was someone who I loved the book. I thought it was great. I think I gave 4.5 stars when I read it. So yeah, I'm glad you like that one. So it's Twisted Games by Anna Huang. If you don't know this, Twisted Games is my favorite book out of that series. Hands down my favorite book. I don't know what it was, but the way that Reese is, the bodyguard and like royalty trope gets me every time. Someone said Marietta by Scarlett Drake. I'm probably pronouncing this wrong. Now, this person is a patron of mine, and she messaged me and she said, I need you to read it. It's an MM romance. You're going to love it. So it's been on my radar. I'm glad it's one of her favorites. God of Fury is one of her favorites, which she was the one who told me, I think you'd like it. Give it your last chance. And For the Fans by Nyla Kay. For the Fans is a very long contemporary romance, but it's an MM very hate to love romance. Exiled by Jessie Walker. I have heard of this author, but I haven't heard of this book. Maybe I'll check it out. Someone said The Bully by Sophie Lark. I love the Kingmaker series. The Bully is actually one of my least favorites, and I think it's because I haven't continued, so I don't have the appreciation for Dean's redemption story, because I personally felt it wasn't done in his book. Like he gets redeemed like throughout the series, I think. So I need to continue on that series. Someone said The Wishing Game. No author, so I don't know what book that is. Stolen Touches by Neva Altaj. I read 2 or 3 books in the Neva Altaj Painted Scars series, and I definitely want to continue because 1, I'm in the mafia mood, and 2, I know that she has great representation of like disabilities or scars or tortured heroes in this series, so very intrigued. Under the Stars by Laura Pavlov, which is interesting because After the Storm almost made it on my top books of the year. Under the Stars is book 3 and After the Storms is book 5. I haven't read books 3 or 4. You can read them completely out of order, but I'm glad you liked it. Someone said You and Me by Tal Bauer. I loved Gravity by Tal Bauer, and I've made it a point this year to read more Tal Bauer's books because I've heard that they're very emotional and really good, so definitely on my list. A Dowry of Blood. I loved A Dowry of Blood. It was so different when I read it. Now, I read the indie version. I don't know if the new version has things changed, but I'm very interested in S.T. Gibson's other books coming out this year. definitely intrigued. Someone said Mixed Signals by B.K. Borison. This is actually my least favorite in the series, and I think it's because I listened to the audiobook instead of physically reading it, but Into the Weeds was one of my favorite books of the year in 2023. Someone said Remain Nameless by Hey Jude 19. This is a fanfic that has been on my TBR, a Hermione fanfic that has been on my TBR for a while. Okay. Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. Yes, the anxiety rep in this book was so freaking good. I just did not like the female character. And that is the only reason why it did not make it on my top books of the year. Say You Swear by Megan Brandy, which I will say congrats to her for this book being picked up by, I think it was by Bloom, but I definitely want to read it. The Highwayman by Kerrigan Byrne or A Crown of Oaths and Curses by Jay Bree. The Highwayman is a good historical romance. It's a dark historical romance if you're someone who's a dark romance reader, wants to try out historical romances. Also, this Jay Bree book is actually on my TBR because I've been in a fantasy mood. So I have high hopes that that's going to be good too. Another God of Fury. Oh my goodness. Silence of Thorns by Eva Winters. I think she's a dark romance author, if I'm not mistaken. Offside by Avery Keelan. I loved Offside. I love Shutout even more. So definitely check out Shutout if you haven't already. Fourth Wing. That was on my top books of the year. Yes. These Infinite Threads. Ooh, that sounds like an interesting fantasy. I'll have to check that out. Soul Eater and Before I Let Go. Kennedy Ryan, of course, is going to be on people's top books of the year. Someone also said Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. I also love this book. This was also one of my favorite books of 2023. And I think like for some people who just go into this book thinking like, oh, it's just going to be a cute contemporary romance, I don't know if you're going to be blown away, but I think for me, the appreciation of why I gave it 5 stars comes from the way that she wrote the book and the way that she told the romance story. I don't know why. The Fangirl, the manga volume 3. I haven't read manga in a really long time, but I used to read a lot of manga. But sometimes it's hard to like get like to stay caught up with a series, like a manga series that is like constantly coming out. Because like it takes a while for the books to release, but then like it takes like 2 seconds for you to read them. I need to find series that are already out, if that makes sense. Manga series. But then they said Twisted Games was their favorite romance. Love Twisted Games. I feel like Reese is like so underrated. So underrated. Can't Even Know by Eva Dad Can't Know by Eva Marks. Is this like a step sibling romance? What the heck? Someone also said Yours Truly Again. Yes, Abby Jimenez. I'm excited for her new book this year. I think that might be one of my faves. Where There's a Will. I don't know the author, but I've seen this book kind of floating around. I think it's an MM romance, and I'm intrigued, but I want more people to read it and like tell me what they think about it. I think I've only heard one person, which is the person who submitted this one, talk about it. Someone said The Words. I think that's by Ashley Jade, and that was my favorite books of 2022. So I'm glad people read it in 2023 and loved it so much. Heartless by Elsie Silver. That was another fave of 2022 when I read it. Twisted Promises by Lillian Harris. I've heard of that author, but I haven't read anything by them. So that is everyone who submitted their favorite books of 2023. Thank you so much for submitting if you did. I love doing these like sit down and like talking about books because sometimes it's books that I also loved and, you know, read and adored in 2023. But then there's some that like I read previously or some that I have not read that I put on my radar. But thank you so much to Max Monroe for sponsoring this video. Make sure you check out Cluelessly Yours. I'll have the link to the book in the description box below. I hope you check it out. Rom-com, friends to lovers, a little bit of a love triangle, all the good things. But thank you so much for watching. For the emoji, please drop me a purple heart emoji. I don't know, I'm feeling purple heart emojis today. But thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe for more content for me. As always, I hope you're living a novel life, and I will see you in my next one. Bye, guys.